of this for that.
Oh, we're live. Goodness
we're
me.
live. He's hit a button. Ooh.
I feel invigorated already. Yes.
I suppose we should say hello. At the moment, Gary's having some technical issues. We think he's lost his camera. Now, me and Bruce are going to have bets.
Yeah, I think he's just gone back to bed, actually.
Oh, wait there. I can hear myself. Wait there. Let me find it. Get rid of that. I've lost it. Yeah, Gary's just having some technical issues, so he should be on in a minute. We're going to have him bets of where he's lost his camera. I think he's sat on it. And it's disappeared, but he'll be back on in a moment.
I'm not going to even go. Think about where it went then. I'll demonetize it.
Let's demonetize him before he comes on.
Yeah.
So what have you seen this week, Bruce? You seen anything interesting?
It was obviously the Japanese situation with the registration and so forth coming along.
Yes, they've set that 200 grams, haven't they? Which is interesting because DJ already put Mini in that category before it even started. So I guess that was a bit of a hint for everyone, wasn't it?
Yeah, I guess they've been talking to the regulators. It's keeping on side, and therefore you get these little handouts of information so you can make your products accordingly.
It is interesting why they're 50 grams lower than everyone else. Because the consensus has always been this 250 gram minimum virtually across the globe, hasn't it?
Except Australia.
Yeah. Well, what's it over there?
It was 100 grams, I think, in Australia. And New Zealand had 100 grams for a while, but now we have nothing. There's no lower limit here.
Okay.
But everything is smaller in Japan, remember? So they're just keeping up the principle that everything's smaller in Japan.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. Now, I haven't looked too much into that. So have they got full registration now coming in as well? Is it the same thing?
Yeah, they're going to have to register and have proof of identity and all that sort of stuff. And I guess when China brings it in, you have to scan your face as well, I suspect. Like with the phones.
It's interesting because obviously we've just had the UK has now kicked in. So if you're a drone user in the UK, if you are going to fly and you are not a member of one of the big 4 clubs, including the BMFA and FPV UK, you now need to register. And the thing around that, to clarify, is that's if you intend to fly, because you don't have to register if you're not going to fly your aircraft over winter. And there's been a lot of confusion around this. People saying you must register today. No, you don't. If yours, like mine, is sitting on a shelf over there and it's not going to be used for the next 2 months, keep your money in your pocket. Don't rush out there to register today.
Did you see that BBC news story they did about the registration? They got it so wrong. Talking about you had to register your drones. No, there's no registration of drones. It's registration of operators and pilots. What's wrong with the BBC?
Again, it's a classic example of their tech reporters don't actually know what they're talking about. And I've seen it time and time again that they have these tech reporters that head off to CES and things like that. And they go, look at this new Samsung TV or this brilliant phone. They have very little insight into the real industry. And it's only like when you get to the proper tech websites, you start to get the guys who really understand it. But yeah, they were saying, register your aircraft. You go, no. You've got to have an operator ID and a flyer ID. Nothing to do with the aircraft. It's one registration. Once you've done it, you're done for 12 months, but you do have to sticker every one of your aircraft before you fly. But again, if you're not going to fly, you don't have to do it. Way!
I don't know. Can you hear me?
We can.
No.
Over. Oh. I don't know. As I was looking at the timer and you guys weren't already here, I thought, well, I'm going to start by myself, and the computer went. But anyway, have you had fun without me?
Yeah, no. We've already arranged demonetization. You've got to fall foul of those new child regulations.
The $43,000 fine is on its way to you.
Hang on a minute. I can already do that. This is now a toy video.
This is now aimed at children. Gary, you're going to get your door kicked in at any minute.
There we are.
Did you see the latest thing that YouTube is doing? Now you're going to have to pay provisional tax on your AdSense earnings because some of the money is generated by US video watchers. It comes out of the USA. So a lot of YouTubers now get a thing saying we're going to have to charge you provisional tax on your earnings. And if you don't have a reciprocal tax treaty with the USA, it means you can't even claim that back against the tax you pay in your own country.
No, I've missed this. Right, I've totally missed this one. So
do they want YouTube gone then in the hands of lowly normal people?
It's getting that way. And I saw that Susan, the CEO, she admitted online that it's not, you don't get to choose, we get to choose what content appears on YouTube. So she's saying we're a publisher. We're not a platform anymore. We're a publisher. And that opens them up to huge liability.
Yes,
she's actually made that statement. So things are going to change rapidly, I think, around YouTube pretty soon. People want to flee. People are dying to get out of the place, and they're making it so hard for anyone to stay. And with the risks of fines and now having to pay provisional tax, that in New Zealand's fortunate, we have a reciprocal tax treaty. So when they take provisional tax out of mine, I just claim it as tax already paid when I come to pay my taxes. But other countries don't have that arrangement. So they're going to lose out that tax. And I guess there may be some way you can claim it back from the US government, but it's a lot of palaver if you're only earning a few $100 a year. So just the whole thing's falling apart.
So what's the justification for them deducting the tax at source then? That's
because it's being earned in the USA from US sources.
Right. So they're basically wanting a cut of, the international money as well. Okay, I see what they're saying. It's almost a bit like the Apple thing with their earnings are not taxed in the US for all their international sales unless they repatriate the cash. So I'm guessing they're just looking at ways of doing that.
Well, it's the ultimate irony because YouTube structures its own affairs in such a way that it moves all its profits to very low tax countries like Ireland and certain tax havens. So they pay very little tax, but now they are basically putting the tax burden, just like the liability for copper goes onto the creators. I mean, it's like, whoa, seriously bad.
Yeah.
And with that, a lawyer appeared. Good day, Tom. How are you?
Look at that.
Good morning, good evening, everybody.
Tax and law, and a lawyer appears. That's amazing.
If I send in my shoebox, can he do my tax return for me?
I do have an accounting degree, but I'm not using that right now. Sorry, Stormy Daniels.
I can't help but think I'll quickly come to the last week, the YouTube wanting tax and all that. From the amount I earn, I bet that it'll cost more to administer than the flipping earnings. The simplest thing for me to do would be just turn off monetization.
But it gets even more complex because they can only tax you on the money that you've earned by US sales. But of course, US sales, when a US YouTube viewer watches your videos and gets shown an ad. But a lot of the views come from outside the USA. They'd have to separate that out because that's not taxable. Are they going to do that? Or are they just going to say, no, we just tax the whole lot. And if you don't like it, find another platform.
Well, they know where it comes from, don't they? Because we can always see the demographics over a period anyway. So they're going to know the percentage of the views from where. But as you say, separate it down.
Revenue. It's actually the revenue those views generate, which I haven't seen separated out. So I've only seen the demographics. So because different people in different countries get shown different ads with different CPMs, so it becomes a pretty complex process.
It just switches. It's never worth it, is it? Well, I'm not trying to earn a living on it, so that's lucky, isn't it? Is that your tax box?
No, in this box is the new YouTube, the alternative to YouTube. In this box, I'm doing
it's a Raspberry Pi.
Yes,
I see it.
Geez, he's good, isn't he? Look at him. Look, he's
but already it's going to fall over.
Which one did you get, Bruce?
I got the Raspberry Pi 4 with the 4 gigs.
You got the 4 gigs. I got the 2 gig up there somewhere. So I need to watch your videos because I'm going to build it with my 2 gig one up there.
Yeah, so I'll be doing a series of how-tos and whatever. So hopefully lots of people will buy them.
I've only got a slow one. I've only got an R3.
No.
So
and it'll overheat too.
It's scrap. You need to burn it, Gary. Well, it'll burn itself, to be fair, but you just need to turn it on.
So last century, I don't know.
Well, that's me. And you see, for those of you that, Tom, I promise we'll talk to you in a minute. It's been a bad start to this show for many reasons. So we'll just throw convention. We'll talk to you in a minute, but I'll quickly say, if you've been following the news in South Africa, you'll see that we've had the hottest temperature recorded ever in Africa, on the continent of Africa, 2 days ago. And here I am in my winter gear. So it was 54. It was 54 quite on the other side of the country 2 days ago. And now we're back at 12. I've never known a year to go. We were in the early 40s, 41, 42 here. But I've never known a year when we've gone from 40s back down to sub 20s in over a couple of days. Never known it. And I see your cat. I heard your cat just now, Bruce, complaining, and you've had a tornado go through there, and we've had 4. But I think you're actually supposed to call them funnel clouds, aren't you? Because we don't get tornadoes in our Wood of the Neck, something like that. But what's up with the weather this year? rant ends.
It's as it usually is over here. It's wet, it's been windy, and it's horrible. So that's generally okay for me.
Situation normal.
Yeah, right. Let's get on to Tom Pearls, who's the drone lawyer. It says so. Look, it says so there. Tom, you follow Australia, and I watched your posts on LinkedIn, and you always publish very succinct stuff. Where are we? Where are we at the moment with Australian law? Currently, no drone sizes. There we are. That's Greg, who can't join us, but like shared, I'm currently challenging Southern Shire Council on the no drone size. Where are we at in Australia? What's your current state of madness?
Oh, we're on the precipice. I think we've got, and as in many countries, we're on the verge of drone registration, pilot accreditation. UTM is on the verge with our Minister for Infrastructure issuing Air Services Australia, which is our air navigation provider, with a statement of expectations that between 1 July 19 and 30 June 2021 must develop and implement a UTM. So between Rego accreditation, the UTM, and CASA just dropped its RPAS digital platform, where it's like the iTunes of Civil Aviation Safety Authority. People throw their apps on, get the CASA seal of approval. Then it's an app in their platform, if you will. And interestingly, Google's got their finger in all the pies. The platform, the first app on the platform is a general where you cannot fly platform, and the first app is by Google, but the platform itself is created by Google, which CASA licenses for them to create it. So I'll give you that. But so there's a lot happening it's all happening at once, which is very exciting here in Australia.
Exciting, or are you pedaling backwards over there? You really were ahead. You were ahead of the game by a long way with your regulations and your seemingly light touch to everything, but it seems like you're falling in line with the rest of the world and joining panic stations, or have I got that wrong?
No, I think you're right. So as you know, we were the first country in about 2002 to have drone legislation, and then we had the sub 2 kg rule in about 2017. You're familiar with that? And they might have gone, oh shit, we've gone too far. Now they're pedaling in, now they're pedaling back, as you said, to the registration accreditation scheme. So they've got some accountability and some data, some numbers on how many drones there are, because even Department of the Border Patrol in Australia, no one knows how many there are because there's no requirement registration. So yeah, we are wheeling back, but it's in line with the ICAO and those things.
So is that the bottom line? Everyone's afraid of how many they are. Is that really where all this is coming from? What's your opinion, Tom?
It's just fear of the unknown. You've got from the early adopters, innovators, all the way through to the laggards, and I think we're at that community buy-in stage where a lot of people are still scared. It's still on that spectrum of this is an unknown future, but there is big uptake, obviously, in the industry. But I think it's about that community buy-in, and that's sort of making it a bit. Community is reluctant to completely adopt, but we've got Wing and Things doing good things, trying to do that.
Well, interesting. I've just posted just before we started. In fact, that's what I would hit the button on. Maybe I didn't post it because that's when the computer crashed. But only 23% of the public in England support drone deliveries. So that's from the Institute of Mechanical Engineers. Just put out a report. And,
interesting.
Yeah, so only 23% of people think it's a good plan, and I kind of concur with that. I think there's going to be plenty of other ground surface-based methods that are going to be far, far better. But hasn't Project Wing basically not quite, but almost moved out of Australia?
Well, no, not as far as I'm aware, because they kicked off in Canberra, in the Australian Capital Territory, as you know. And as part of that community buy-in, they did a bunch of reports. They were forced to go out and set up community stalls and things like that to get community buy-in. And their report, not saying, no comment on the veracity, but their report is the community was very much accepting of that. There was a noise issue which they're addressing. But
that was my thinking. That was my thinking that the noise issues put them away a little bit for the moment.
Well, now they've just kicked off in a suburb in the state of Queensland, cities. Brisbane, in a back suburb in Brisbane, they've just kicked off another step. So I don't see a retreat in Australia. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm wrong then. Fair enough.
That's wrong. So it's exciting times here.
Boys, do you want to jump in and ask anything about Australia?
You go, Bruce.
What's the national anthem? Just have to start with something simple. Are your regulators in that listening? Are they actually observing the facts? And I mean, we've got all this regulation, all this control, this registration stuff coming in to solve a problem that doesn't really exist in terms of safety and liability. I mean, how many people have been killed by these things again? I mean, is it like every country in the world? Do they respond to logic, facts, evidence, and reasoned argument, or do they just say, no, we're going to blunder ahead like the rest of the world?
Well, if you're blundering ahead with the rest of the world, at least you're with the rest of the world, aren't you? I guess there's that consistency aspect they want, whether right or not. If the herd's going that way, well, we might as well follow the herd. But that's a smart thing. Probably seldom is to follow the herd. They do. Whether the genuineness or not, they do have open consultations for months at a time, so people can write in and write submissions and whatnot. So they do seem to take into account the industry's or whoever wants to contribute's views, but notwithstanding that, they're still moving on with the herd, with the rego and accreditation and things. So, I see your point there. There's been no really significant event to warrant this. But on one hand, are they getting ahead of the curve? And they put this structure in place. And I see the regulations, probably biased because I'm a lawyer, as more of a facilitation, not a strangulation of the industry. Like any strong industry has strong regulations. Look at motor vehicles, boats, manned aircraft. They've all got very strong regulatory frameworks, which allows for a robust and a long-term fruitful industry. Whereas if they kept drones out the back in the paddock with just where you go for your life, it wouldn't manage to impact the economy in the way it will if there's a robust regulatory system around it.
So have they drawn a distinction between the drone industry and the recreational drone community? Because obviously the risk profiles and everything is significantly different. And if you apply one set of regulations to all, then you're either over-regulating one sector or you're under-regulating another. So have they made that distinction? This seems to be where around the world regulators have simply failed. They don't realize that drones per se, they don't even draw a distinction between drones and the traditional hobby of flying radio-controlled models. And the hobby of flying radio-controlled models has a very long and impressive track record of safety and responsibility. So why are they burdening that community with the perceived possible risks associated with an industry that's still nascent and hasn't actually proven to be a big risk anyway? Is this fair and reasonable? In Australia, do rules and regulations have to have a sort of a burden of being fair? Is there a responsibility, or is there no threshold for that?
Oh, good question on the fairness. The legislation does go through, part of the rigmarole is it has a compatibility with human rights statement, and that's part of the process. And they will give 2 or 3 5-pages saying, it's compatible with all our international convention obligations. So yes, in that regard, it does address it. And interestingly on that, Australia has, our civil aviation law, they've just introduced an aspect from the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights on a cost aspect. So CASA, in addition to safety being its prime initiative, it has to consider the cost burden on operators in the community in promulgating its standards. So, for example, one example possibly, if the registration prices are crazy unreasonable, there could be a human rights cause of action there to say this is disproportionate to what the cost is disproportionate to the benefit. So that's the fairness question.
There's also a thing where they are, I think probably for cost reasons, required to follow. If there's another risk analysis has been done by another country, they're obliged, aren't they, to take that into account rather than reinvent the wheel. But as far as I'm aware, no country has done a comprehensive risk analysis on the whole drone issue. So how can they be producing regulation without quantifying the risk involved? Is that reasonable?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, there doesn't seem, as you said, no real robust, apart from a few YouTube videos of drones flying into jet engines and things, and but you're right, good point. I don't know what the actual the data or the analytical basis of some of these things are in that regard. And to address your distinction question, model aircraft and remotely piloted aircraft are distinguished in legislation, but in the legislation that's going to be introduced next year, an RPA is not a model aircraft. At the moment, they can be the same, but the new legislation will completely separate that. A model aircraft will not include an RPA, which is essentially an RPA used for sport or recreation, certain educational purposes. So there is a bit of a distinction, but drones operated recreationally will be still in the same bucket, if you will, as the model aircraft that have been around forever and have the best safety record probably of all aircraft. So yeah, I think there still is that muddying of the waters.
So can the public actually challenge these regulations by saying they're unjust, they're unfair, they have no grounds, but in terms of risk analysis? Is there a mechanism in Australia where the public can actually challenge a regulator like that?
Well, there's challenging the regulator who enforces the regulations. Then there's obviously Parliament where you can go to court and challenge the actual legislation. So it depends which angle you want to go. Yeah. So I could see, and there's all these councils and local authorities having these drone rules in their regulations, whereas typically aviation is in the sector of the federal, the Commonwealth sphere. So there could be a constitutional challenge that I'm going to push for on that, maybe.
So who regulates the airspace? Do councils have any powers to regulate the airspace, or are they solely the ground? Because in most countries, like the aviation regulator controls the airspace, and the other authorities have no right or ability to regulate what happens in the airspace. So what happens when councils say you can't fly drones here? Do they have any legal right to say that?
There are, and it's patchwork. Some councils, you say, can I fly my drone on your park? And they say, yeah, it's fine. It's not our area. And others will say, you need to have a permit. You need this, that. So it is absolutely, when we're talking council here, with a boundary and a council here, will have completely polar views on what you have to do to fly on their land. So notwithstanding they have different views, my understanding generally is it's not their purview. Yeah, yes. From where you take off, some issues there. But as for the airspace itself, it's not their, as far as I'm aware, it's not really their purview.
So are these councils being challenged? Because no, some are saying you can't fly here, you can't fly there. I mean, surely there must be something out there to clarify that, so that councils aren't operating beyond their purview, beyond their legal authority.
No, as far as I'm aware, there's been no, apart from regulatory fines and things, there's been no significant drone cases in Australia yet. This is this stuff's still steaming. It's still got the barcode on it, this stuff, so it's brand new. So it hasn't happened yet, and I can't wait to not that I want to see this, but cases need to be initiated to test some of these things, to test the veracity, test the power, test whether it's ultra vires, test whether it's within the power of these people. Definitely, but no one's got the money or the wherewithal or the desire yet. It's early days, you guys, relatively early days.
So the courts, their responsibility is to uphold the law. It's not really a justice system, is it? It's a legal system. If you go to court and you've broken the regulation, you're going to get pinged, regardless of whether it's just or not.
Oh yeah, it's who's got the deepest pockets. Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah, or in civil, it's the deepest pockets, but criminally, yeah, I've challenged CASA a few times before court and investigative stage and put them to proof, and they've come back and said, yeah, we'll drop a few of those and just give you a fine. And this was a client who was issued.
Please, sir, please. Can you unpack that? Can you unpack those last that you've put them to proof and things? Can you unpack that for the layman a little bit more? That's mean. What does that mean? Where did you get them? Which part did you get them backing down at?
In short, the client, amongst other things, was flying above horse racing, being paid well by a broadcaster to fly over horses and record the races, so you can see the jump and everything. And unfortunately, the aerodrome was within 3 nautical miles of controlled. The race course was within 3 nautical miles of controlled aerodrome, which you can't do without approval. And there was alleged breaches of within 30 meters of people flying a populous area, 3 nautical mile thing, hazardous, not following their procedures. And we just looked at what they wrote, which was not written particularly well, and just challenged everything they said, just putting to proof on the 30-meter. Gave the client's background. This was an ex-chopper pilot with thousands of hours in a chopper, the drone pilot. So he was an experienced guy. So I gave his good history. I just asked them questions about what they've alleged. And they came back and stuck with the 3 nautical mile because the client had said to him over the phone, I was flying there. And the other allegation was a different race course to which they didn't provide a date. It just said it happened in this month. So with that detail, they backed off down that one. So it's just looking at how they've constructed their argument, putting all these pointy questions to them and saying, well, what do you have to say to that?
So that's called putting to proof then.
Yeah, well, that's So substantiate your allegations against our client. Yeah.
Fair enough. Oh well, thank you for that. No, just like to clear these things. Greg Osprey Drone is mentioning in the comments LGA Act. Well, first of all, he mentioned. Can you comment on the new CASA requirement for local governments to ask permission to erect no drone sign? Is that mandatory? And what's the recourse if your council fails to comply? So I'll put that up there. That was that one there on the screen. And then further down, he says. LGA Act, you need a plan of management that applies to public space to authorise council to restrict use of public land. None of this means anything to me. That's that one there.
Here we go. I can see it on the screen there.
Okay. What's your comments on that, Tom?
Oh, I haven't seen that yet. So you got me. But on the face of it, you want to comply. On the face of it, you probably want to comply until you dug deeper and saw the basis of this requirement. I'd be very keen to run my eye over it and see what they're trying to do, and see if they can do.
Oh, hang on, he's joining us. Here we are. Greg, do a better job than I just did of asking about that. On you go.
Yeah. So, is my mic working? First of all.
Yeah, you're here.
Okay, cool. I'm currently having a bit of a battle with my local council, Sutherland Shire Council. So they erected some no drone signs, and the particular area is the only slope soaring site in my local area. Okay, it's the only suitable place. And I had a look into it, and a few things they did wrong. First of all, I noticed on CASA's website, and I posted the link in the chat, CASA's now saying that councils need to apply for permission to display the no drone sign logo. So that's one of their new requirements. How they did that, I don't know. But if you have a look, Tom, at the link I put there, that's an interesting one.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I think it's the right thing to do for councils to, they're trying to justify these kind of things on the grounds of safety, but CAS is the safety specialist, and their app is saying, hey, it's safe to fly here. How can council be restricting it if safety is their justification?
Well, the opens, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the first one. I'll just quickly go to the other one, the Local Government Act. That the signs that they erected, they said they erected under the Local Government Act. And I went in and had a look, and their authority to do that is only if they've got a plan of management that covers the specific restrictions that they want to place on that land. So I had a look at the plan of management, which was last updated in, I think it was 2009, which makes no mention of drones or anything to do with them. But yet all of a sudden council is putting no drone signs up there. And then they said CASA asked us to do this. So I spoke to CASA, to their media liaison, and said, no, we haven't spoken to Sutherland Shire Council. It wasn't us, officer. Then I spoke to council again, and they said, it was Sydney Airport Corporation who said, you can't have flying less than 3 nautical miles, 5.5 Ks away. But this park is outside that zone anyway. Anyway, I'm just having a rant, but yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
It's grandma's patchwork quilt of regulations. Everyone's got a different. That's it. And until we have a court case that goes, you're right, you're wrong, you're an idiot, you're smart, everyone's going to be doing this. And the council next door will say, yeah, fly your drones, get into it. I'd be happy to talk with you further about this and mounting a challenge or mounting some sort of, some tricky questions, put them to proof.
I'll send you a copy of the stuff. I've already sent some stuff through their official staff conduct complaint process, because they've lied in the process of getting the expenditure approved to erect these signs in the first place. So there's some misconduct in there as well.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, if you just remember, if you open the toothpaste tube, it's hard to put the toothpaste back into the tube. But if you want to go for it, let's go.
Yeah.
So, Tom, how do you get to be the drone lawyer? Did you think, look, there's an industry that's ripe for jumping in and helping out, or were you an avid model flyer who's also a lawyer and said enough is enough?
No, it was more the former. I was reading a financial paper a number of years ago and saw the Gartner hype cycle. You ever know the Gartner hype cycle?
Yeah.
And drones are on there, and it just struck me like a bolt of lightning. This is probably 2016, 17, and that's when the laws had just changed, so people with under 2 kg drones could fly without a license. So it opened up that whole real estate photo, sort of all that stuff. And I thought, this is cool, and it just had an epiphany. And since then, just been reading and writing and advising avidly since. And
why would I? Sorry, Tom. Why would I come to you for your services? What pickle would I have got myself into?
Oh, yeah, good question. Well, either a lot of people unfortunately come once the Civil Aviation Safety Authority is investigating them, they go, oh, shit, I'm going to lose my license. Other than that, just general assistance. I do drone services agreements. So, the contracts, my background other than drones, because we all have pre-drone lives, which is, I think is very cool. We've all got lives before drones, and mine, which still takes up part of my practice, is commercial litigation and general commercial law. So that background mixed with this, my interest in the drone regulation, things like drone services agreements, all sorts of agreements in the business sort of environment. Also, just help with interpretation and regulations and applying those to your business, flight authorizations. So, yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on the famous fishing drone, if you're not representing him and you can speak about that.
I think they're Australian Ned Kellys. Everyone know Ned Kelly?
Yeah.
He's a famous robber that everyone glorifies. He's actually a robber. No, smart guys. And I read somewhere the AFP.
Quick impression.
Yeah, exactly. The Stig.
Case.
The Stig. No.
That's the one, isn't it? That's the fellow with the
That's right, the Stig. Yep. They never identified no one knows who the pilot is. So if you can't ping the pilot, no body, no crime. However, my understanding is they've been investigated heavily and deeply and thoroughly.
Yeah.
I saw something on.
My response to these regulations, when I think they're unfair, is to challenge them by way of disobedience. And I'm a strong believer in it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission in many cases when you get this patchwork quilt of regulation and so forth. And is there if enough people just said, like when registration comes in, if they just said, we're not going to register, no, you can stick it up your backside. What would be the response, do you think, of the regulators and the authorities if that happened? Like in the UK, there's only a small percentage of drone operators have registered by the deadline. And in Canada, I think it's like 10% or something of the perceived number of drone operators have registered. So what happens when people don't?
Wow, good question. Two things, if I can jump in on that. One, on the it's easy to ask for forgiveness and these to get permission. I've had clients that have not in that vein, but they have breached the regulations. And while CASA investigates, they can't apply for any authorizations. They can't apply for anything other than what they're doing. They can operate. Sometimes they can't. But I've had clients being investigated for 8 months, and they've been applying for things where they can fly close to airports and things, and all that is back burner. So the biggest problem is the penalty is not when they come and give you $1,000 fine 8 months later. It's that 8 months of you can't do anything, and you're just on your knees and you go, I'm in limbo. You'd rather a bad outcome than limbo for 8 months, I think.
But if you're not going to follow the rules in the first place, you're not going to follow the rules when they say you can't do that. So it doesn't apply.
In that regard, yeah, you're always going to have the Cowboys, aren't you? Definitely. So no, I wonder if there's a mass boycott. I know what are the what's this, a Mandela or a Che Guevara situation? Just revolt. I don't know.
Well, there sort of was a precedent in the UK with the shotgun license. No, was it shotgun? No, it was the game license. I can't remember. So the other Ian's not here. He'll remember. And nobody signed up for it, so they had to abandon that scheme because they didn't get the numbers. And I know that it's about 50,000 have signed up in the UK. I was sent a slide deck from a Civil Aviation Authority presentation last week, and I'm gently going through that. Makes for some interesting.
Your example of shotguns brings me to another interesting question, Tom. There's been 2 cases where in Australia drones have been shot down, and this is one of my little hobby horses. One of them was a real estate drone, and the person whose house was next door to where they were filming shot the drone out of the sky. The guy went to jail on crimes relating to possession of firearms, but nothing under the Aviation Act. Second case was a LiDAR-equipped survey drone, and it was shot down doing some legitimate work over power lines by some redneck farmers.
Yep.
Now, it was over an easement, so they had the right to do that as well. Neither of those were prosecuted under the Act. Do you believe that CASA and or other parts of aviation regulation have a mandate to prosecute under the Act if a drone is shot down out of the sky?
Yeah, wow, good question. Be interesting, because obviously the other offences are typically state offences, whereas the tampering with an aircraft is a federal offence. So, yeah, good point as to whether they're compelled or obliged to actually take it up. Well, they do have discretion as to whether they lay charges, but it seems like more of a lazy option rather than the efficient option, what you've said.
I will say that I know that the ATSB was notified about both of these events, and both of them are conspicuously not listed in the database. So it sounds like they just don't want to hear about it.
Mm.
Well, I've said it before. I think this is where they don't want to have that test case. They don't want to have to say it really is an aircraft and we really are going to treat it as an aircraft, because it'll open up a complete bucket of can of worms.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, but it's an important one. I mean, that LiDAR-equipped machine would not have been light. So who knows who that might have
Pricey
hit
stuff.
yeah,
it was reportedly $500,000 Australian dollars in value.
Yeah. There's a lot of that.
Money and weight. But what about the weight of it coming down on someone's head?
Yeah,
because
that would have led to the test case. Yeah.
I'll just shoot me gun up. I'll just shoot me gun up, and it's not going to come down on me.
Yeah, well,
Exactly.
yes. There is that. But it's
well, the registration thing raises an interesting point, because, like in the UK, their £4 million registration system fell over at the first hurdle, and people couldn't register for a while. And here in New Zealand, we've just got a new register for people who are having to hand in their semi-automatic guns, and they discovered a huge security breach. You could go on and get the names and addresses and bank account details of anyone that had registered. So, what burden of responsibility is there on the government or the regulator to ensure that if they're going to implement a registration scheme, that the information is kept securely? And if they fail to do that, what obligation is there for you to use that system?
Yeah, good point. Well, yeah, there's data breach legislation here in Australia, obviously, but as to if that gets breached, that's happening all the time. We've had the Red Cross blood donation being hacked. In Australia, we've had some serious hacks. Imagine people finding out people's blood type and if they've got certain blood diseases and things. So there's definitely a framework for it, definitely. But as to the breach, I've got a mate in cybersecurity who loves that stuff. But there'd be that obligation, certainly.
With that in Europe, of course, that'd be GDPR. And I don't know if Ian's seen the slide deck, but it looks like the Civil Aviation Authority may have developed that expensive database in-house.
Yes.
And it may have been a 1-year project. So I'm not quite. So I've got to join the dots with that a little bit. Have you joined any dots with that, Ian?
The problem is there's ghosts around every corner with this. That's the problem with it. Every time we think we know something, something else throws up. I haven't looked at it too deeply, but it does appear that a lot of it's been done in-house. The second they announced about when they were told that send the stuff over by a spreadsheet, scared the hell out of most of us who even value our data a tiny amount, let alone those who really care. And then we had the email hack, which was a couple of days later. It wasn't even a week, if I remember. So it does worry me, whatever they're doing in-house. And to be fair, the CAA, for the most part, are actually on drone users' side. They do take quite a bit of a kicking in the UK, but when you do go and talk to them, they get everything we're saying. And yes, there's been a few faux pas. There's been the incident with Andy and stuff like that, but they're certainly not against us. However, there are bits of it that it feels a little bit like amateur hour at times, that it's just a couple of guys in a room and someone says, I've got a great idea, let's do this. And someone goes, do it, go on, hit the button. But to be fair to them, I think we've also got to understand that there's a huge amount of pressure from above. I think their problem is that there's a sea of water above them, of pressure to get this thing done. And I don't care how it's done, just get this thing done. And that's where the problem is.
It's the same in Australia, though, wasn't it? Kazza had a really good setup, and then the politicians waded in. They wanted changes, and they wanted this, that, and the other at a Senate level, and all sorts of things, because they read the Daily Mail and they know how dangerous these damn things are. What would Kazza know? They're only the regulator. And that's happened around the world. It's happening in New Zealand. Our Civil Aviation just commissioned another survey, yet another survey, because the data they've got doesn't correlate with what politicians want them to do. So they've carefully crafted a survey that gets the answers they want, so they can then say, look, this is why we have to do it, because you guys said this. But of course, the way you target the questions determines the answers you get. And they've done a very, very clever job, and that's what we're dealing with now in New Zealand. That's the third survey. And if they still don't get the information or the answers they want, I'm sure they'll do a fourth one.
It's interesting, Tom, and you touched on this a little bit earlier. It's going to be really interesting to see where someone stands if there's an incident and they're not registered, because we have a large amount of model aircraft users in the UK who are now saying, I ain't doing it. I don't care what you say, I'm not registering. Now, this time of year, it's not going to be too much of a problem anyway, but as we move towards the summer, there's going to be more and more people do this. Now, one of the insurance companies has come out and said, unless you're registered, we're not going to cover you. However, as I understand it, BMFA and FPV UK still to this day say their insurance will cover you regardless of you being legally entitled to fly or not. Now, I still don't see how they can say that, because in any world, in anything I deal with, if you break the law, you're on your own. Basically, however, and this is law, like it or not, it's law. But it's going to be interesting to see, what's your thoughts on if someone does absolutely nothing wrong, yet an incident happens, let's say, there's an incident and the drone pilot's done nothing wrong, but it is found that he wasn't registered. How is that all going to play out for that person? Because at the end of the day, they're going to be putting a real big cross on his back, aren't they?
Is this when this person should have been registered?
Yes, he should have been. And that's where it's, because there are going to be people in this situation. There are going to be a lot of guys who are refusing to register. And what happens to them if this goes wrong? Because not registering in itself doesn't make you dangerous. That's the point I'm trying to make. You could have you could have Bruce, 2 days of experience. 200 years of experience. And, I'm not registering, and something happens entirely out of his control, but he's implicated in the incident. Where is he going to stand?
In legislation that is not out yet, the registration legislation, there is certainly penalties for flying a drone that should be registered that isn't registered. Yep. There's that, and that's the first instance of fine.
Yeah.
Then if there's property damage, then obviously there'd be some potential charges for damage of property. That's the criminal side. Then the civil side, the person who got injured, they can take them to court and sue them for the damage they've suffered. So,
but it would be the same even if he was registered, isn't it? And that's, the reality is, he's only going to lose the fine for not registering in that scenario, Yeah, and this is the point I'm sort of making, is there's this huge assumption by the media, anyone who isn't registered is dangerous. And that's where the media is going with this. Anyone who chooses not to register is dangerous. The reality is someone who chooses not to register are probably actually well within the industry, because they know enough to decide they're not going to do it. They're not on the dangerous side of the scale. The assumption is always, if you choose not to follow the law, you're dangerous, but that isn't necessarily the case.
No, interesting. The Vegas. What about the Vegas situation now? In the USA, it's $5 for 5 years or something to register. Yeah. But in Vegas, the guy registered, but his drone flew away and landed next to an active runway. And because it was registered and they could trace it back to him, he got a $20,000 fine. Now, I think the fine for flying without registration is much lower. So I think he would have been better not to register and he'd escape the $20,000 fine. And I wonder if that's going to apply elsewhere as well. The other thing in terms of Australia is the rules over there, a bit like New Zealand. They're trying to edge the regulator into dealing with matters of privacy and security when it's not the regulator's responsibility. Their responsibility is aviation safety, yet they're putting in all sorts of things, or trying to put things in to protect people's privacy and protect the security of the nation, you know, like from terrorists and things. Is that really something that's within their purview? Can they do that, or are they just sort of taking very broad brush on this one?
From what I've read, no, they've said no. We're aviation safety. We don't do privacy. It's a separate issue. They've drawn the line there from what I've read. And I haven't seen there's nothing in legislation or regulations about the privacy issue. We have the Privacy Act. There's not really a right to privacy in Australia. Industries with more than 3 million, organisations with more than 3 million annual turnover, are subject to the Australian privacy principles. So they've got some stringent personal and sensitive information provisions. But under 3 mil turnover, and if you're not dealing with like medical records, there's no real right to privacy. There's common law things such as confidence and things, but there's no specific legislation generally, no right to privacy. There is the Surveillance Devices Act. So if you're doing the peeping Tom, not this Tom, but another Tom, peeping Tom, recording or filming people in a private setting without their knowledge, there's a breach of legislation there. But in general, that whole right to privacy is great, non-existent largely. But CAS has drawn the line and said, no, we're safety in the sky. We're not privacy.
I'm just scrolling that.
I have seen a few CASA documents where they briefly mention that you shouldn't do these things, but you're right, they definitely don't regulate it. They're just trying to be respectful, and that's, I think, the right approach.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
I don't know, but Ed, you did mention earlier that you're going to have a separate category for model aircraft. So Australia is going to lead the way in either clouding or clearing that side of things.
Yes. So my reading of it, the drones will still be in the same category as the typical model aircraft that's been around forever and very responsible. But there'll be a definite separation. The legislation clearly says an RPA is not a model aircraft, although two can be drones. Both can be drones.
So do we know the criteria for the differentiation?
Yeah, it's an RPA, a remotely piloted aircraft, not a balloon or a kite, and excludes model aircraft, essentially. So the RPA is very...
model aircraft. How do they define it? Because it's like... Yep. There are definitely overlap between drones and model aircraft. So how are they going to distinguish? What are the criteria? Because that becomes crucial.
So a drone can be an RPA or a model aircraft. But so the model aircraft is defined as an aircraft that's not a balloon or a kite, that's used for sport or recreation, or certain educational, institutional research purposes, and So it's under 150 kilograms sport or recreation, or under 7 kilograms for certain research and educational purposes.
Without putting too much of a point on it, I bet the future definition is going to be really simple: GPS or no GPS.
That's what I thought would be important. Because the other thing is, if I fly my Phantom 4 recreationally, it's a model aircraft then.
Well, under registration, you can if you register as an RPA, you can be a model aircraft. If you register as a model aircraft, you can't be an RPA. That makes so. If you register on the higher one, which is RPA, which is commercial essentially, you can fly it as a model aircraft. You register as a model aircraft, you can't use it commercially.
So the differentiation is done by categorizing the use rather than the actual type of craft.
Yeah, definitely. Yep, use 100%. Yep, which is great, and it can swing between both. Definitely. So, and there's no case, as I mentioned, there's no significant cases to flesh this out and say what the hell does this actually mean, other than these 20 words.
That becomes difficult. Then what about? I assume that the differentiation will be whether you're using it to make money, right? So if you're using it to make money, it's an RPA, and if you're using it recreationally, it is a model aircraft. So what happens when people like me make YouTube videos flying recreationally, but we make money from them?
YouTube would be a thing of the past by then.
I'm going to hear more about this guy at some point. I'm very fascinated by all this, and you pulling out your little widgets and things.
Yeah, we all have widgets. We definitely all have widgets.
When I'm playing my widget, it's not a computer normally.
You know what? what I think would be really cool is if they start looking towards some of the things we want to do that we officially can't do now. So BVLOS, for example. If they go and say, hey, BVLOS is an RPAS only, and if you're a model flyer, you can't use that. So not only do you get to pick the category of what you're doing, but you get some extra privileges as a result of that. Maybe that's a good way of looking at it. I'm hoping that they go in that direction. Have you heard anything about BVLOS or extended approvals for RPA versus model?
I know it's about half a dozen Aussie people that have BVLOS capability, and you have to. You can pay CASA. CASA does a 2-day workshop for $4,500 to help set you up to go BVLOS. You go through the SORA. You guys heard of the SORA framework?
Yeah.
So they take you through the SORA, charge you $4,500 for a 2-day workshop. Doesn't mean you're going to get it. It just means we'll walk you through.
I've got it together with REOC that I fly under Morrison Aerial Robotics, so we've got the ability to do that already.
Have you got the approval?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Oh, sweet. Okay, you're in. So what was your? Were you talking more generally as adding that as a criteria or a part of the process?
Yeah, I'm thinking put commercial aside for a minute and just go back to normal use of a drone, recreational use of a drone. It would be cool if there was some extra carrot and stick. Okay, model aircraft, non-GPS, flying 100% line of sight. RPA, next category up. You can do some extra things, and you want to be in that category. Here's the carrot, but the stick is you've also got to apply by this. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah. I think that that digital platform, the intention is the third-party app providers on there will eventually be connected to CASA, so you can do all this stuff through the app, through the third-party provider, like paying your rego, potentially flight authorizations as well. I don't know how that's going to unfold with a independent third party having to forward fees to CASA. That's what's happening.
Well, I think,
Tom, in Canada, they have no prescriptive regulations for sub-250 craft. Basically, it's do not endanger personal property. That's the guideline, right? It's an advisory as much as anything. It is a rule, but there's no height limitations. There's no limitations as to where you can fly or when you can fly, because they consider sub-250 to be such a low risk profile that it would be regulating children's toys. That sounds like a good idea. And since that regulation or that lack of regulation was introduced, I've seen not one incident in Canada involving sub-250 gram craft endangering people or property. So wouldn't it be a great idea for regulators around the world just to take that stance and say, let's just keep kids and their toys out of the equation? Why do we want an 8-year-old having to register? And why in the UK do we have the situation where an under 18-year-old can't even legally own a toy that weighs 251 grams? Why don't they simplify the whole thing a lot simpler and just take out a whole lot of the noise at the bottom end?
Yeah, at the moment, micro is still sub 100, and that sub 250 is in the new legislation, but it's not going to come out until sometime next year. And for my reading, model aircraft not till 2021 or 2022. So it's sub 100 is still the micro category, which is almost do what you like. So, but the one up that very small RPA, 100 to 250, that's still subject to some regulation. I'll have to check that. But yeah, they are moving towards that, sub 250.
Yeah, so couldn't you lobby it because of the directive that says they should follow overseas risk assessments and guidelines where applicable or where it saves them money? Shouldn't someone be lobbying and saying, well, look, let's follow Canada because they've been doing this for nearly a year now and they've had no problems at all. Therefore, it works. Therefore, we copy that, copy and paste that, and we've saved ourselves a whole lot of trouble having to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, well, they're doing, I think sub 250 is the new sort of, everyone's using the sub 250 gram, and we're doing that. We're in the process of doing it. So I think we are, following.
Yeah, but most countries have said, well, yeah, sub 250, you don't have to register, but all the rules still apply. You can't fly within 4K of an airport and so forth. But what they've done in Canada and say sub 250, the only rules are you may not endanger people or property, which is there's no loopholes in those laws, but there's no prescriptive rules. It doesn't say what your maximum altitude is or your whatever. So that is the simplest way to do it, because people only have to remember two things. People can't say, I didn't know the rules, because there's only two damn rules. Don't endanger people or property. And as I say, it's working. It's not as if it's a failure. It's been extremely successful. So why isn't Australians, why aren't they lobbying their regulator to say, well, look, let's follow Canada. They seem to have got it right.
Do you like all of the Canada rules though?
No, but that's a good one. You've got to pick and choose, mate. Not every country. I mean, my example is, what is the safe exclusion zone around an uncontrolled airport? That is the biggest variable across all countries. In New Zealand, it's 4 kilometres. In Australia, it depends. It was up 50 metres to the side of the runway or something, and so much out the end. And in America, it's 5 miles or something. It's like no one can make their mind up. So that's because nobody has done the risk assessment. They're all plucking figures out of their backsides. And so, why can't we have some consistency and follow the best in the business? Like in New Zealand, we have a shielded operation, which gets around a lot of the problems. I can fly a model aircraft right up to the boundary of an airfield, providing I stay below the height of the tallest object and there's a barrier between me and the airfield. So that means I don't have to worry about flying in a park that's a mile away from an airport because there's trees around the park and so forth. No other countries have picked that one up, but that would be perfect for so many countries, and it gets rid of that noise at the bottom. But everyone wants to create their own wheel. They want to reinvent the wheel. So why is some consistency coming here? And should we as a community be lobbying our regulators? Because most people just seem to sit back and take whatever's thrown at them. I'm the exception to the rule. I stand up and say, no, that's not acceptable. I'm not having that. And should we be taking a more proactive part in shaping the regulations? Because I know these people consult. They're legally required to consult, but they're not obliged to listen when they consult.
But I'll just throw in very quickly that I think I'm still amazed at the number of people in the UK that are only just waking up to the fact that this is happening. So should the industry or should the community jump up and down? Well, they don't even know it's happening. They don't know they've got to jump. And there's been a failure. There's been a failure, mass failure in communication to members of model flying clubs, or there's been a mass movement of sticking heads in sand. I don't know which it is. But I think that's
to another point. Here in New Zealand, this review of CAA fees, levies and charges 2020 or something's just come up. They want to levy drone users for educating the public about drone rules and things. And so basically they want it for training people and so forth. I'm thinking, why are you going to regulate the users? Why are you going to charge the users to inform the people who aren't users? It's like that. Imagine if you had swimmers got charged a levy to train non-swimmers. I mean, no, that doesn't make sense to me. There's a lot of burden of cost seems to be put in the wrong places. If taxpayers are worried about drones, let taxpayers foot the bill, not the drone flyers. We don't charge criminals for the police force. We charge the general community for the police force. So why are we trying to put these burdens onto the drone operators as we're just, we're not the ones that are afraid of drones. We're not the ones that, want all the enforcement. Let someone else have that problem.
I think as a community, we're quickly going to become the biggest cash cow that any aviation authority has by user numbers. I wouldn't mind betting that already the fees coming in from the drone registration scheme in the UK has eclipsed the amount of money coming in for private pilot, commercial pilot, and ATPL pilot licensing in the year. Because I bet you I doubt there's even 500 people going through that system in a year in the UK in any of those categories. And if you're a PPL, you only pay it once. You pay it, that's it. You pay it once to get your license. CPL is every 10 years. I think you'll renew it, and I think it's a little bit less for ATPL. So I bet they're already pulling in more money from the model aircraft and drone community. And if that were to be the case, I think it's another Freedom of Information Act coming up. If that were to be the case, then I would expect our community to receive the amount of respect it deserves for the money it's putting in. And I think that they should be jumping up and down on AOPA members a little bit harder and sorting out all these manned aviation accidents and crashes to a much higher level. I just realised I'm on a full ranty horse here. No, it's just beginning to annoy me. The bottom line, if it is all about money, if as a community we're putting more money in, then we should have more say.
No, it's not $1 per vote. It's not $1 vote, $1, is it? But Tom, one question. You're talking about human rights before. Now in the UK, if you're under 18, I think it is, you cannot legally be an operator of a drone. You can't own a drone. You can't be responsible for a drone or a model aircraft even. Isn't that breaching the rights of children, forbidding them to own a model aircraft and enjoy the hobby from that regard? Because the case I sort of draw up, the hypothetical case, is little Johnny. He's 13 years old. He goes out, he delivers papers, mows lawns, gets enough money to buy himself a drone, but legally he can't own it. And his mother doesn't want to know about it. His father doesn't want to know about it. He's forbidden to enter a hobby that has a long reputation of safety and responsibility because some guy in an office somewhere behind a desk decided that it was far too dangerous. So could they apply for, could they challenge that on human rights grounds?
Is it definitely own and operate? Do you know?
They can operate, they can fly, but they can't own a drone. And if no one else is prepared to take responsibility for the ownership, then they can't fly either, because a drone must have the operator number on it, and an operator must be over 18. So if no one's prepared to stand up and be operator, he cannot legally fly that drone because he's in breach of the regulations.
Yeah, good question. That's really tricky one, really curly one there. You have to look further into the convention, or to the convention that's been ratified, or the law to which it specifically, where it corners that part. But could be a challenge, age discrimination challenge there. Yeah, good question.
Well, I suppose it's because I think we'd agree that a shotgun or something was obviously a dangerous thing, so we're not going to let a 4-year-old have one. So are they putting the same amount of risk with a small drone as a shotgun?
And then motor vehicle things. Yeah, good point. You have to look at it. And an extreme example is usually a good way to pull out the real issues, like a 4-year-old with a shotgun. No way. And then the needle goes up. Yep, definitely. And yeah, good point. But,
Tom, can I take you back to Australia for a sec? Just curious if you've got any updates or information on the registration prices. They were originally proposed to be $20 for hobbyists, and up to, CASA said at one point, $160 per aircraft for non-hobbyists. Have you heard anything on that? I know they pushed back the implementation of that scheme, but I'd be curious if you had anything new.
No, nothing on costs, sorry. No, nothing on costs. But the rego was supposed to come in November this year, and it's obviously RPA's been pushed out to mid next year, and model aircraft looks like 2022.
Yeah, I think they were going to get the registration system from the UK, but then when they saw the Excel spreadsheet, they thought maybe we'd better delay it.
And to pick up on that in-house point you fellas mentioned before, I know, would you rather the government hold it, or would you rather Google hold it?
No, I agree with you. I completely understand where you're coming from, but the point is, it was allegedly put out to, well, Ian, jump in if I'm completely wrong, put out to tender. A company came in, was paid £4.1 million to do the job. But if it was actually the Office Junior with an Excel spreadsheet, it's like, well, what's going on here? What's occurred?
And the interesting thing was that was the highest listed bid they received as well. Now, whilst they never said it was the highest one they chose, if it was the highest figure and they told us how much they've spent, then it would imply that it's the highest one they went with.
Yeah, there's lots of dodginess there. That's why I was putting those slides by. I mean, obviously I wasn't at that CAA meeting, but I appear to have got the slides. I don't know how that sort of thing happened. And I just love to share those sort of things with my friends. So yeah, there's lots of weirdness going on there, and lots of mention of the European stuff that's coming up, because again, in the UK, people are saying, oh, it's all right, we're going to be out of the EU soon, it's not going to matter, who cares? Well, actually, it does matter, because we're following along with exactly what happens. None of that's going to change. It's such a thorny subject, all of this, and one wonders what the bottom line was for all these cobbled together systems that the world's getting, that really serve little to no purpose, in my humble opinion. I don't know, but
are you surprised that there's no better organisation within the drone and model flying communities to challenge and to shape these regulations? It seems like we are sitting on our backsides just taking whatever's dished out to us. And in the UK, the BMFA was really late to the party, and they thought they had a privileged position, which basically they got shafted. The same happened in America with the AMA, the National Model Flying Body. They got shafted by the regulators. Is it time for Australia to man up and form a really tough opposition to the parts of the rules they think are perhaps not suitable? And should this happen around the world? We don't have a global representative body in the way that aviation does through some of its organisations. So are you surprised by that fact?
He's bewildered. Are we all still here?
He's muted.
He's muted.
To whom was that question posed, gentlemen? Was that
To you.
do you
Your
have
name's
to put my
Tom.
2 cents in? Well, we do have the ICAO, and they've got JARIS. You think that's not? I haven't seen them doing much. What's your view on them?
Jairus. What's Jairus?
So you know, ICAO. JARIS is the Joint Authority for Rulemaking on Unmanned Systems. It's the International Civil Aviation Authority, whatever it is. You know what I'm talking about. It's the unmanned version, JARIS, Joint Authority for Rulemaking for Unmanned Systems, and it developed SORA. It made up SORA, the Specific Operations Risk Assessment. That's the international body.
But I'll tell you
The
what
thing
that
is
is. That's a group of manufacturers. That's what that is. It's not a representative group of users.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, when you look at the user base, we talk about drone users. 90% of drone users are recreational users. They are the large majority of the industry is a tiny percentage of actual people flying drones. So why isn't the majority of the drone community, why aren't they standing together, standing strong, forming bodies to represent their interests in the face? Because at the moment, the drone industry get like 10 seats at a meeting and the hobby gets 1. You know, even though if you look at the volumes of participants, that's completely the wrong way around. It's because the industry is prepared to get off the backside and do things. The hobby just tends to sit around and take whatever's thrown at them. And how can we change that?
And the answer was back when you were my age, or maybe further back. People join model aircraft clubs. People who fly drones for recreational purposes don't join clubs. They watch you on YouTube.
Yeah,
right?
but even with the established bodies like AMA, the MAAA, and over in Canada, all the national model flying organisations that do have members, like in the UK, how many members they got? They've got hundreds, and in America they've got 200,000 members. They all still fail to stand up for their rights and to shape the legislation. They just got sidelined.
I agree, but they're not big enough to be a real representative of the entire drone and model market. That's just the way it is. We've got so many more people now. We need representation. We don't have it.
Yeah, but the industry, take an industry group in the States, for example, what single industry group has more members than the AMA, which has 220,000 members or something? I don't think anyone does. So why are these groups that represent the huge majority of people in terms of using, compared to industry, why are they being sidelined so effectively?
Well, look, there's the CAA slide with when they worked out the how they were going to do it, and look, the BMFA gets a mention, but look, YouTube is on the family flyers, the novice, the enforcer, manager, but YouTube BMFA is there, and then if we slide across here, there's ARPAS. So that was that I thought was interesting. This slide I thought was interesting, and the fact that the CAA really didn't think there were all that many bodies that were representing us.
No, and as always, they don't ask, do they? And that's the funny thing is, as you say, when you look at who is actually representative of us, it's a shambles, really. To be honest, isn't it?
It is a shambles. It's a pity this slide is very blurred because I can't really read all the stuff it says about the traits of each group. But there we are. Look, you're either an early adopter, a serious amateur, family flyer, novice, enforcer, manager.
I bet they spent £4 million on getting this data together.
And look, what made me laugh is look, the professional's a fat bloke, so he's doing really well. His business is on the up and up because he can afford pies. But look, we were all. This is the what was it? Reckless, clueless, careless,
careless, and criminal.
Well, look. Isn't it sort of in this slide? Isn't it? They're already pigeonholing the industry and things. But who am I? Let's just go to that other one. This is the line that made me laugh. The ideation phase. I really do need to become a modern business person. Look at that. Anyway,
I must have had a big team building exercise for that one.
Absolutely. It was a year's project. They knocked that together in a year.
You're as productive as the number of post-it notes you put up.
Well, there we are. Well, then, oh no, that's a metric. Yeah, we can measure things by that. Oh my word! Yeah, I know. Well, let's look. We've been going a while. Let's just quickly slide on. Please stay with us, Tom, and jump in and and be annoyed or whatever. And Greg, if you've got to do family stuff, you can go, or you know.
Yeah, my father had brain surgery, so I'm going to go and disappear. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Greg.
All the
I'm
best.
sorry to hear that. All right.
Anyway,
I hope. All right. All the best. Look after yourself, and we'll speak. I'll speak to you soon. Cheers, mate.
okay.
All the best.
Cheers, Greg. Oh dear, that's I made light of that, and that's not so jolly, is it? So why have I put so UIM is hard then? Do we see that that it's all fallen apart? And I think it's Bruce's fault because it was being developed in New Zealand, and well, it's all fallen apart for Kitty Hawk, Larry Page's outfit. Jumped into bed with Boeing, but they had lots of fires and lots of technical issues, we're led to believe. You're not going to admit what you did, Bruce?
No, nothing to do with me, mate. Nothing to do with me. I didn't set the charger to lithium ion instead of lithium polymer. It wasn't me.
Did you actually see? And the fire, one of the fires they had was in a set of batteries, having remotely piloted the craft. Nobody on board, crashed, so brought the thing back into the hangar, and it set fire afterwards. Caught fire afterwards. Yeah.
One of the questions in the survey that I was talking about earlier that just came out and I filled out was, how comfortable would you feel flying in an unmanned aerial vehicle like taxi, urban mobility vehicle? You know, very comfortable, uncomfortable, blah blah blah. And so I said extremely uncomfortable. Not at all happy about that. And I think I must have been right.
I think so. I think you probably.
How many people?
Right.
I can't see people rushing to use these things. When we look at, you know, electric cars catching fire. Mind you, petrol cars catch fire too, but I mean, it's just the perception. You know, we've had our perception shaped by the media, and even we have been shaped to some degree.
No, I'd be well out of the way of that. It's just interesting because the noise about urban air mobility is going through the roof, and it's made me look at that mobility subject, and micro mobility seems very interesting. Sub 500 kilo moving of stuff, and I learned something this week. I learned why America is allowed to have 750 watt electric bikes, and it sort of makes you wonder why this logical thinking has not been applied in our world. But they said it's legal to ride a horse without you don't need a license to ride a horse in America. 1 horsepower is, and apparently I haven't checked it, Bruce probably knows, it's 750 watts. Therefore, the largest electric bike you can have in America is 750 watts, whereas in Europe it's just arbitrarily 250 watts. So why didn't any logical sort of a bird is this big, therefore a drone can be that big? You know, why is it?
Because there's all sorts of different sizes of birds. Just as there's I mean, there's a Clydesdale. How many watts is a Clydesdale versus a Shetland or a pit pony? You know, these things. Exactly. It's a very fuzzy area. That the law likes to deal in definites, in hard lines, and black and white. None of this airy fairy, you know, my horse is bigger than your horse stuff.
Yes, but I just thought it just struck me as, wow, it apparently went through the older Bush government, and that's what they decreed. Yeah, is it more than a horse? Can't have it.
Yeah, but let's face it, Americans still use pounds and ounces and miles and stuff like that. They're so behind the times.
Well, there's also that. There is also that.
But Gary's frozen. He does that sometimes. Must see the cold weather he's complaining
about. I just
noticed
that, yeah. That's a cracking position to freeze on as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
let's see if he comes back. I wonder if he's crashed.
Probably.
His PC's on fire right now. That's what's happened. It's all gone horribly.
So Tom, give us a pitch for your business. Good. People want to contact you. Do they know how to do that? Are you shilling for business at the moment? Turn your mic on.
No, thanks. Always showing your business. Yeah, very keen to speak and just hear what everyone's doing, like their story, and if we can do business, great. If we can just have a chat, fantastic. I don't mind, but I'm very keen to hear. So as I was just mentioning before, yeah, I'll chat to anybody about the Reeks and how they're going in their business, and just get a picture of where people are at and what they're up to.
And is business brisk? Are you getting enough business? Is it worth being in this vertical market?
It's early. It's relatively, you know, in talk of industry itself, it is early. So the commercial law and the commercial litigation still takes up a fair bit of my practice. thankfully. But I'm really trying to push and get out there and get more work on them. My idea is to have 100% drone work. That is my dream. Not there yet, but I'm trying to work on that. Just between people not being aware and people don't usually want legal advice until they need a lawyer. By then it's too late. You're in bloody you're in damage control by then. So I'm trying to sell, but just espouse the value of getting some advice early, because get it now. Right now you pay for these. I don't need to pay for this now, but you don't want to pay for it when you're in trouble or when you're breaching something, because that's when it's really expensive and that's when it's out of your hands. So I'm trying to sell that benefit through drone services agreements and just helping people with their flights and things. Yeah.
So do you see yourself as being the Brendan Schulman of Australia?
Wait, what? that went over my head. I'll have to Google it. Let me
Do you know
Google that.
do you know who Brendan Schulman is?
You know who Brendan is? Yeah, I'm guessing.
The guy that he defended Trappy
Yeah,
when he flew in the States, and now he's DJI's legal.
done all right, and he hasn't done bad for himself. He only works for the biggest in the world now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Get me as general counsel on one of these big swingers, please. I don't know. It's a fine line. Right now, I'm flexible. I'm lean. I can write what I want when I want. Pump out articles. You can't do that when you're under a big umbrella. But
It's interesting because obviously there's a number of people around the world, people think of a drone lawyer as the guy standing next to you in court when you've done something silly. But the reality is a lot of big businesses are going to be looking for legal counsel, advice, and the steps they take forward when they're going to want to integrate UAS programs in the future, whether it be, the likes of UPS, Amazon, and those companies. Those are the biggies who've already been doing the groundwork on this stuff. But when you start getting businesses and councils and organizations that are going to want to not only write the laws but actually put in place their own UAS programs, because people forget councils are quick to ban these things and put restrictions in place. However, there's huge amounts of money that can be saved through inspection, through maintenance using these aircraft, and the governments are not really even beginning to touch on that stuff yet.
As you would have seen, there are tons of consultants out there, and it's still in the shakeout period of when you use a consultant that will typically advise on regulations, whether they should or not. We'll leave that to the jury. And that final line of integrating drones into your operations, which is consultants can do that. And then where do I slip into that to say, okay, this is my part. You should probably draw the line there, and this is where I can actually provide the value or provide the advice. So I'm working with a few different drone consultants just to see where I can fit in with their offering. But I think it's still finding its feet in that regard, and I am too, to be honest. And where
because the consultant really is if you can, and the lawyer comes in is if you should, and that's the two if you balance them, isn't it?
Is it easier to chase drones than ambulances?
Oh, come on! Pull out my GPS jammer. It is.
We're seeing a rise of it in the UK. There's a gentleman I met at the UAV show in the UK who's also a barrister, and he's looking to make a mark in it in the UK as well. So you're seeing guys all over the world pop up and look at this and go, look, this is not just going to be big from a money industry and size point of view, but from a legislation, from a legal counsel point of view, there's going to be a lot of test cases to come. We haven't scratched the surface on the reality of the legal side of what happens when something happens. I'm not going to say goes wrong, but even the implications of someone, suing you for just flying, and that is going to start happening, and that's the reality.
Yeah, great point. And exactly. And we, like you said, mate, we haven't even scratched the surface. It's early days, and at times I'm thinking, when's it coming? I'm out there, and there's a lot of legislation, but when does the wave come? And it's about chasing the wave. You got to paddle for the wave, but it's still.
Yeah, we're in the first wave of the legislation in the UK now. We're a little bit, we're not ahead of everyone else. That's probably not the right term, because we're behind Canada and places like that. But we're ahead in where most countries seem to be going. We've now done this registration thing, which has been set in stone. It's now in law. It's now a requirement as of Sunday. It's now a legal requirement. Now, next, we're going to see where the laws fall, because there was a bill that was meant to go through Parliament to give the police more powers. Now, thankfully, with the mess the UK has found itself in with regards to Brexit, that managed to get kicked out. So all of the new powers haven't actually come into play, which is a good thing, because we've argued from day one they don't need them. We don't need them having the ability to give us on the spot fines or kick my door in because I own a drone. They have laws for that. If someone's using a piece of equipment for an act of terror, or they're using it for something else, they have the laws in place. They don't need suspicion I own a drone to be the reason they're allowed to kick my door in. And we've seen them do that already in Gatwick. We've seen them do that with that poor couple who had their doors kicked in, frankly, because they lived next to an airport where there was allegedly a drone flown, yet there was no images, no actual evidence it was ever there. So we've had that, but next we're now moving towards electronic conspicuity. We've got drone ID, which is falling in with the EU regulations coming on next year, and then we're going to see where the land lies and how people cope with what happens if they do register, what happens if they don't, the whole BMFA situation, because I think that'll be reclassified as well. I still don't see how FPV UK and the others can stand back and say you will be insured. I think you're going to see that change, and that'll change if something happens, and that's the reality.
There's got to be a broker or an underwriter going, don't say that. Yeah. Whoever's broking underwriting these guys, going, don't say that, guys. You're going to get our heads chopped off. You're going to get our funds broke if you say you'll cover you no matter what. Yeah, 101, you're illegal, you're not covered. Or a lot of insurers in Australia won't cover people who don't have remote part licenses.
Yeah. I've always compared it to a car. If I have an illegal tire on a car and I have an accident, they are not going to pay out. It's as simple as that. If the tire is bald, the accident may have had nothing to do with that tire whatsoever. However, as part of the checks, it will be done, and it will be, no, sorry, you were driving illegally. Just like if I don't have road tax on my vehicle in the UK, they're not going to cover you either. So there's a lot to come into play, and then we've got Fins, which is looking like it's around the corner. He's on the floor now, look.
And he's got no A or Y in his name.
That's true.
You'd be pleased to know it froze on a particular. Yeah, we can, and you'd be pleased to know it froze on a particularly. What's the word I'm looking for? Interesting pose.
While you were gone, we determined the purpose of life, and 2, solved every problem in the modern economy. But we won't rehash on that. Don't worry about that. We'll just keep going on. It's fine.
And Bruce got you demonetized for the next year.
Oh, again. I am now on my mobile phone, but I've had to get a computer running again and then put me on the stream from my mobile phone. I couldn't join the host. Oh, what a hassle. I'm having a heck of a day. But 42...
We've not had problems, have we? We've not had problems up till now.
I think it's the computer. It's probably done a whole load of Windows.
2 things, Ian, if I may. Just comparison to your regulations with who can come in and issue the fines. Our incoming legislation, which is written but not in place, is that our state and territory police are allowed to ping you for fines. Where's your rego? Where's your accreditation? And fine you on the spot for that. So they've been delegated that authority.
Yeah,
which is interesting. And second, I really want to follow this. So if you can, we'll talk later or send an email or LinkedIn thing later. I'd love to know whether it's you or someone who's writing about how this is unfolding, because I'd love to crystal ball gaze in Australia and say, well, the UK is 1 year ahead. Let's see how that unfolds, and then how can it be applied to Australia so I can crystal ball it.
It's we talk about it most weeks. The UK seems to be the revolving subject. We've managed to get off Gatwick now. It's only been a year. We've managed to lose Gatwick, but
where's the next?
It's early days. No, I can dig it back up again, Gav, I'm sure. It is early days, and as I said, we went live on the 1st, so we're in that position now. But it's a bit of a shotgun start because they've given some clubs the ability, or members of those clubs the ability, to not register until February. And they've done that so people can register through those clubs, and it all ties in with their annual membership. But the numbers are looking ridiculously low. There was a comment that about 50,000 was the initial registrations,
50,000.
and there are approximately 30,000 BMFA members alone. Is it 30,000, Gar?
Yeah,
I think 35.
A little bit less. But
Yeah.
yeah.
If you add FPV UK, there's 5,000 commercial operators in the UK, which we all have to register. At the end of the day, we don't have a choice. I've done mine. I left it to the last day, but I did do it. So in theory, they should be able to get about 70K out the door without any pushing. That's with clubs and everything. And if they've only got 50, things are certainly not going to plan already. I will be shocked if they hit over 85,000.
The bottom line there, though, is that they dropped the amount of money. It was going to be £16.50. They dropped it to £9, and they need 180,000 people to break even at the current costs.
Yeah.
So that's not cool.
It's probably going to take some media for you to when people are getting fined or done, and people go, "Oh gosh, I was going to boycott, but this person got fined." And I think the first people are always going to start beating their chest, say, "I'm not going to register," and you put a few.
Oh, Tom's. Can you hear Tom in your
Oh,
He's
he's the next Gary. Yeah.
There's another one gone.
But
the war of attrition.
but he's not quite right, because what's happening is that the hobby is shrinking. People are giving up. People are selling up. People are just putting stuff away, not doing it anymore. So it's not as if people are going to say not like they're going to make a few examples of people and all the rest are going to register. If they make a few examples of people, even more people are going to say, I'm not going to risk it. This is too hard. I'm going to take up golf or, I don't know, gardening or something. And the hobby is crucial, and the industry is crucial to aviation as a whole. I don't think they know what they're doing. The unintended consequences could come back to haunt them for a long, long time.
I think
absolutely.
They've moved a few silly mistakes, and that's the problem. If they had done it so you didn't need to register on BMFA land or registered club sites, I think that would have helped people accept it a bit more, especially the fixed wing community and the guys who only ever fly on that site. Because at the end of the day, if someone's only ever flying on a club affiliated site, what is the point of them registering? At the end of the day, you know who they are, you know where they are. There's no need for registration at that point. It's as simple as that.
But it's like, I as a person that's been flying models for 60 odd years or something, I still find it abhorrent that I am now being turned into a criminal because of nothing I've done. When I was a kid, I used to go and fly my planes in the school grounds. I used to go and fly them in the parks, and everything was fine. Now, I still want to go and fly my planes in the school grounds and in the parks, but if once the registration comes in, if I don't register on the offenders list, I become a criminal, an offender. Why is that happening? Why is it even acceptable? Because I have changed absolutely nothing. They cannot say that yesterday this was a safe and enjoyable pastime that people of all ages could enjoy. Tomorrow it's only safe and enjoyable if you pay us money and you go on a list. No, we've just got to stand up and say that's not acceptable. There's no justification for that. Where's your logic? Where's your facts? Where's your evidence? You need to deliver the proof, as Tom was saying. Proof up. Where is it?
I think we've lost Gary again. I think he's trying to come back.
I think the lights have gone out in his toilet. Listen.
No, I don't know. I was hoping you could hear me through the other microphone.
Oh, that don't sound good.
No, that's flush twice, mate. That's terrible.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to apologise for the interference you're currently experiencing. Gary is trying to make his microphone.
Normal transmission will be resumed as soon as possible.
We need one of those colour things with just a picture of Gary's face, like on the old BBC that used to come up. Yeah, the testing on the screen. But yeah, so we're in UK. If you're in the UK, you should register if you're going to fly. And I'm being clear with everyone: if you're not going to fly until February, March, you do not need to do it today. If you're a BMFA member, if you're an FPV UK member, you can wait until the end of February because you can do it then with your registration then. But you don't have to do it with that registration, but you have a free pass until that time. And if you're not going to fly to the summer, hold off. It's as simple as that. You know?
If I'm a tourist coming from New Zealand with my drone, what do I do?
Yeah, that hasn't really been explained at the end of the day because you're not a UK citizen, therefore you can't register. So that's a little bit of an open one as well that needs resolving because you wouldn't be able to register your name and address. It only accepts UK users as well. So that is something that needs resolving. It'll be interesting to see how the whole thing pans out at the end of the day.
That's actually really important because they have international model flying events. You know, if I go to the UK to compete in the UK drone racing championship, am I going to be able to do it legally?
It's interesting. That's something because you have to register as a UK person. That's actually interesting. Go and have a look at that. Something to dig into. That is actually.
Ooh. I know in Canada, if you want to go to Canada and fly your drone, you've got to get an SFOC, Special Flight Operating Certificate, to do it.
Yeah.
It's like lunacy. And the problem is the higher they make the burden for compliance, the lower the levels of compliance will be. So they shoot themselves in the foot a lot. You know, it should be as easy and simple as possible. And the trouble is when you get people with clipboards and a little bit of authority involved, generally they try and make it as difficult as possible.
Yeah, it's just all the nonsense that was never needed, isn't it? Really, it's just.
Yep, we're there. Unfortunately, it is what it is. As I said, I did mine on Saturday, so I managed to pass the test. I think it's only about the 5th time I've taken it, so I should have got through it in the end after beta testing it.
Got
Still
16
don't like
out of 20?
No, I managed to get a 20 on this one, but I don't agree with the questions.
Nobody loves a SWAT. No one likes a SWAT.
I have done it at least 15 times, I think, now in the tests, and because I did test it beforehand as well. Not sure I'm allowed to say that still, but I don't care anymore. The website's still a mess, but it is what it is. You know.
This is another interesting thing, though, isn't it? Now that you have a document from CAA, they have far more control over you. If you break the rules, they can withdraw that document, can't they? And therefore, you can't fly anymore.
Yeah, well, I had that anyway as a registered commercial operator. The irony is you really do put your neck on the line the second you do that because you are signing your soul away to a book. And there's a massive grey area which I've never been able to get answers on of what you define as commercial operation and not, and at what point the rules you've specified within your ops manual you have to follow. So technically, if you put a load of restrictions on yourself that you do within your ops manual, when you're flying commercially, you have to abide by them. But as a hobby user, I could pitch up to the beach, and as long as there's no one 35 meters around me, I can just chuck it in the air. Whereas my ops manual wouldn't allow me to do that commercially.
Does the CAA in the UK have a fit and proper person element to the issuing of documents? If you want to be a pilot, you have to be a fit and proper person, as you have to be in New Zealand. And if so, does that apply to the drone registration? Because it is an authority to fly. And so what happens if you're a recreational drone flyer and you break the rules too often? Can they pull your flyer's ID? This is stuff I haven't seen defined in any of the regulations.
No, they've not said what happens. You know, they have refused PFCOs. They have had their licenses revoked. There's a belief someone has very recently. I don't really know the facts of the case, but there's a belief someone has had it either not renewed or revoked. But with regards to this, you know, if there's no way that it gives them the opportunity to refuse. So no matter how many times you could be done under the ANO, that's what they would do you under, there's nothing in place for them to say you haven't been successful on this time.
But they have, yeah. But there's nowhere that it says they can withdraw it either, is there?
Not that I've seen. So all they can do is keep doing you under the ANO. That's literally all they can do.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, laws are in place. But
I suppose you can't fly if you're inside. Unless you're shipping drugs in.
Yeah, you just order a drone delivery of your best stuff.
Again, as I said earlier, I'm still amazed at the number of people that are shocked and horrified that this has even happened.
Yeah.
I can't believe that people have had their heads that far deeply in the sand. It just blows my mind.
It proves BFMA members don't read their own emails and their books that are sent out every month. You know, that it proves members of clubs and organizations don't really take a lot of notice of what's going on with the overall club. I think it further proves that affiliate clubs have had little to no interest in this whatsoever. That they've literally let it just fall under the radar, because the reality is, if people had been reading the books, if the affiliate clubs had been pushing this, you wouldn't see the posts that you're seeing. And even, you know, the Facebook page has had very little on it, to be fair. There should have been a pinned post 2 years ago on this. That's the reality.
Yeah.
And it's the lack of kickback that has allowed these regulations to come bowling through. There's no kickback. There's no. By the time people react, it's too late. It's after the fact. And I despair that this whole hobby is so disorganized and so poorly organized. In fact, in America, they've got the FPV Freedom Coalition. The entire of America, their numbers are measured in hundreds for the entire American continent. I mean, USA. I'm thinking it's such poor organization.
Yeah.
Well, and for years we've been banging on about this at SUS News, a bespoke little website for drone and model aircraft news that I run, and most people have been just saying, you know, calling us out as fake news and as naysayers, and it'll never happen, etc., etc. But the writing, this all started in 2007, 2008. All of this little journey, when there's a technology demonstration to the US military, and they saw jets. They've never seen model jets before, and they were terrified. They were absolutely terrified as soon as they saw model jets. I would trace that back to being the genesis moment for this whole thing. Yeah, and to a certain extent, drones coming along in the off-the-shelf, high-performance, cheap method gave them the in to get it all through. But MKJJ saying, what about if you're using a buddy box? Then the person in charge, well, it would have to be registered and all that. I don't know about the person on the sticks. I think that would be okay, I guess, under instruction. I don't know.
I would. Whoever's in control will need a flyer ID. Whoever is physically in control of the aircraft would need a flyer ID. The main RC holder would need an operator ID. That would be my interpretation on it. Basically, they would both need to be registered. That's the basics.
And again, chances are, if you're on a buddy box, you're going to be at a proper flying site. Yeah. Or you're going to be somewhere you fly consistently. If you've got that lead, and if you know, even if you know about a buddy box, I guarantee that makes you a more knowledgeable RC flyer than most of the people that bought a Phantom off the shelf. You know, just the very knowledge of that puts you in a safer category, I reckon.
Well, maybe I missed it, but I would have thought the BMFA website would have details of this. If you're visiting the UK and you want to fly, this is what you need to do. But I haven't seen anything like that on their website.
Nothing's been done yet. Literally, everyone's waiting. It'll become clear in the next couple of weeks, I suspect. Well, probably by February or March. But once all of the registration requirements are in for all of the clubs, that's when it'll be.
No, it's a shame. Anthony said the reality is we're giving up on the hobby, and sadly, you're right. And actually, yesterday, my 15-year-old, shortly to be 16-year-old, still too young to fly on his own, was flying, and he's a much better model flyer than I am. He's much safer than me.
That's more of a comment on your flying ability than his.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it is. It's true. It's true. He's far more safety aware. See, I've taught him well. But I think I was sat there watching him fly and thought how ridiculous it is. He flies beautifully, and it's just how ridiculous it is that he needs. At the age of 15, would need this bit of paper, and an adult. Of course, he'd be lucky in this case. I would sign on the dotted line and all that, but not every 15-year-old out there is going to have a parent who is able, willing, or wants to go through this rigmarole. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Can a club be signed off as the duty parent then?
No.
So if you
That's
go
what
to
the
a club,
BFMA. That's what they wanted, wasn't it? That was the whole thing they were trying to do, was to get it so one club could sign off. Now it always has to be a person. It always has to be a person.
that's a shame, isn't it? So they can't even rock up. So could I how does the relationship go with the flyer and the person who's got an operator's ticket? It would have to be my aircraft then.
Your operator ID must be on every aircraft.
Yeah.
Or operator or flyer. Do you know? I even get confused on this. Wait there.
It's the
Let me
operator
check my-
ID.
It's the
Yeah,
operator, isn't it?
yeah.
It's the person's operator's ID. Yes. So the operator, yes, because the operator is the legal entity in this, is the easiest term to use. They are the person who they will come after if this goes wrong. So it would be the operator ID of the person who is in charge. So if you were using a buddy box system, I guess you would take that responsibility on.
Now, Gary, you set the test, didn't you? Did you get a flyer ID number at the end of that?
Yeah.
You did, didn't you? So I guess what happens is you apply for a flyer ID. When you get to the UK, you put someone else's operator ID on your models. You fly under your flyer ID with their operator ID, and then when you leave, you take the sticker off.
Yeah. Well, but then they can take the flyer ID test, can't they? Under 18.
Yes.
So my son would take the flyer ID test.
Yes.
He would go to the Model Aircraft Club. There would be an operator there with an aircraft with an operator sticker on it, and he would then be able to fly that aircraft.
However, they want you to specify who the person is. So nowhere does it say it can be anyone. It says that person must register as the legal entity for you. So that would imply if you wanted to fly, they would always have to be there. It couldn't be anybody with an operator ID. It has to be the specific person that you're registering that operator ID for. So this is an interesting scenario. Is your 14-year-old son wants to fly at the local club. He can't register for an operator ID, but he can a flyer ID. So he does. You as the parent register as the operator. You, as I read it, you would have to be at that club with him at all times. Even if Grandad's the person who takes him down, or Jim up the road.
Is that going to work though? Because what about in the situation where you have a company that registers and the CEO of the company registers the operator or whatever, but has the employees doing the flying? Surely he can't be at all the sites at once if he's the operator. I think the operator shouldn't have to be there. They're just taking the legal responsibility, aren't they? So they just,
There's a lot of holes in this that haven't been filled yet. Right, let me just look at this now. Register a child under 13 as a flyer. Okay, serious child.
Shall we just do a dance or something while we wait here, Bruce?
Sorry, you can carry on.
No, I'm not taking away. But it's because it's an interesting situation, isn't it? There'll be an awful lot more parents turning or operators turning up if youngsters want to fly at a model. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. It is ridiculous.
Right. Register as a non-flying operator. Use the service when you want to apply for an operator ID, when you own or are responsible for a drone or model aircraft. Well, that's wrong. It's not if you own. You want to fly drone. You do not want to fly drones at the same time. You are over 18. See,
What does that mean?
My understanding of this was that person must be there. I could be wrong on that. I could be totally wrong. But my understanding was that the responsible person had to be there with you. And if that is the case, that is bonkers. And it doesn't make it clear.
I'm sure someone from CAA is watching this, and they will email Gary and inform him of the actual realities. Because for £4 million a year, you expect that kind of service.
You would. Well, all I did the other day when the CAA tweeted that only 12.5%, I think it was 12.5% of people were worried about drones. All I tweeted back was, about a minute after it came up, was, so it only took 12.5% of people to destroy model aircraft flying for youngsters, and they deleted the tweet immediately.
Did they?
That's all it took. But that's all it says. Only 12.5% of people are saying are worried about. I can't remember what it was. So they are out there listening.
It'll be in the ANO. It's not going to be in the. It's going to have to dig into the ANO because that's the law was put into the ANO as part of the changes last year. So I'll need to have a look at what they say in there. I don't think that's very clear at all.
But remember, ignorance is no excuse.
No, absolutely.
No defense under law. You can't say, "I didn't know."
The tiny whoop for a 9-year-old nephew is under 2. Where's the tiny whoop and the child? Where would that be?
Under 250 grams, don't need to register.
Under 250,
yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have to think about it. Yeah, I'm going to have to dig into that a little bit more because that's a bit different to what I thought.
Do you, for your PFCO, do you have to have a copy of the ANO in your
Yes.
out?
Yes.
So, do operators now have to have a copy of the ANO?
Well, I have to have a copy of my ops manual, which contains the main bits of the ANO within it. They still made me put that in. I do have a copy, but to be honest, my copy isn't up to date. I carry that's wrong as of last year. But my ops manual has the relevant bits of the ANO within it.
And do you have to have the AIPs as well?
Yes.
And can you subscribe to those digitally, or do you have, or can you?
You have to be able. The ops manual you have to be able to produce because at the end of the day, if you haven't got it with you, how can you abide by it? Because it's a 78-page document, mine is, and I think it's realistic to say it would be hard to know what every single page says. I do roughly, but I think there are bits you might say, actually, what did I write in this scenario? For operational safety cases, you would have to have all the documentation for that as well.
Well, it's just every time we mention the air navigation order, it just makes me think of a previous life. And I just keep thinking, how ridiculous. How ridiculous. We're talking about children flying model aircraft, and we're talking about the air navigation order. How utterly, utterly, utterly ridiculous. It's just nonsense. I can think, I'll hark back to pull up a sandbag, but, when we were building and chucking RC gliders off hills because we couldn't afford those hot petrol powered things at the front and consistently crashing them. That's what we did most weekends. We built stuff all week and destroyed it in 45 seconds at the weekend when we could get away. It's just unavailable to a whole generation now.
I wonder if it's worth crowdfunding to do a challenge under the human rights legislation that this is actually violating the human rights of children, especially in the UK with this under 18 thing and operators. I wonder if it's actually worth doing that crowdfunding. Or what we need is a lawyer. Do you know any lawyers that specialise in drone stuff? Oh,
any lawyers.
We were saying before you disappeared, Tom, that this whole thing is actually shrinking the hobby. The hobby is getting shrunk. It's not a case of when people, if there's examples made of people, and they find them to say you should be registered. Instead of registering, a lot of people are just saying, well, I'm just going to hang up my model, it's going to get out, sell up and move out and not do it anymore, which further strengthens the case for action under human rights legislation, doesn't it?
Yeah, with that brand new costs implication, I can see an action there. And yes, I've been considering a crowdfunded thing more I was trying to access some information to Google's flight profile and Google's risk assessments and stuff that has real air and ground risk issues that they're not disclosing. I'm climbing up the chain of bureaucracy right now, actually. It's quite fun. The final step will be the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, and that'd be a crowdfunded thing. But you need the groundswell, you need the interest, and you've just got to sell it right to everyone who go, shit, 1, I want to be part of the first drone case in Australia, and 2, this information is relevant to me.
You need someone with a popular YouTube channel to get behind this.
Yeah, get some influencers. Yeah, these.
Who do we know? Egan, you've got a YouTube channel.
No, there's none here. There's no influencers here.
Actually, Bruce has got more than 200,000 subscribers across various platforms. Does Pornhub count?
Does-
It's my main source of revenue.
I said influencers, not people under the influence.
Bruce is
Oh,
an
yeah.
official superstar on YouTube with over 200,000 subscribers, one of the longest standing RC channels.
110 million views across his 2 channels.
Is it 110 million?
Yeah, 115 now, I think. And between the 2 channels, I've got a combined subscriber base of 350k, but there's a lot of overlap, so I don't use it.
Makes us look like
Wow.
amateurs.
Yeah, oh,
Actually,
very
we're
much.
not amateurs.
I earn
We
dozens
are.
of dollars every month from YouTube. It's amazing.
I get lots of ones of dollars.
He earns double-digit dollars. Actually, did you see that?
Yeah, not
Yeah.
triple though.
Did you see? Very interesting. CES have changed their term on influencers this week around YouTube channels and everything. About a month ago, they updated the terms to be able to go to CES because it's invite only as an influencer, and you had to have a minimum of 1 million views a month before they'd let you go. But a couple of YouTube channels have kicked off and managed to turn them round, and they're now allowing people with over 50,000 views a month to go as influencers. But it's just interesting to see it's things are changing across the board at the moment in the little YouTube world as well.
Mm, mm. So when will we see this crowdfunder then, Tom? Because we will promote it, obviously.
My current idea, and I like the idea of the human rights aspect, that might be appeal to a broader cross section. Mine was more to do with the Google information and the reduction of some risk assessments. I'm at the stage, I've taken it to CASA, internal review at CASA, now escalated to the Australian Office of the Information Commissioner. Depending how that goes, then we have a potential administrative appeals tribunal, and it'll be that stage. So I'm taking the very slow process you have to take to get there. So it'll be in the next couple of weeks, if at all. And how I'm going to frame it, and we can talk about that.
Always in aviation, if you mention the golden word safety, it opens doors every time. So if they're redacting stuff that pertains to safety, well, I mean, we can't have that. Can't have that.
Yeah, level playing field. Go for the underdog and all that stuff. And number one, safety, big bright light safety. Compromising of safety, because if you don't know a risk is present, how can you mitigate it? That's my argument.
Oh dear. All right. Now, one thing, Tom, it is your first time here. What I haven't warned you is we don't allow common sense on this channel. Common sense is banned. It's just and in the industry, in the general drone industry, common sense is verboten. So just be
like
careful.
a session of Parliament, exactly the same rules apply.
Yeah. Thank you, Speaker.
Yeah, no, there has to be some serious test cases. Back to Greg's shoot down ones. I'm pretty convinced those and others. There's lots of cases around the world that aviation regulators, what would be serious aviation offences if you was a real pilot against drones, or if it happened to your real aircraft, and they're not being picked up. And I'm sure it's because regulators do not want to underline. They say it's an aircraft when it's convenient to them, but as soon as they don't need it to be an aircraft, it's not an aircraft.
How important is precedence in Australian law? If there is a case and a decision is made, can that be used as a precedent in future cases?
Okay. Oh yeah, if you can apply the facts to another case, it's what it's all about, using previous cases to prove your point. So yeah, but it's not too much that's comparable at present. Yeah, sorry, is that sort of your question? Where the use of
basically, I mean, are they afraid to take some cases forward because they feel they may lose, and that makes it far more difficult to prosecute the same type of cases in future?
Oh, is CASA made? Oh yeah, CASA can pick and choose as to what it prosecutes, but I'm thinking more either the civil cases or challenging a law itself. But you need someone with pockets. You need someone to lay the money out for this, and that's the thing. No one's got the interest yet to go, I'm going to fork out my hard-earned money.
Do you don't work pro bono then? Oh, geez, well, that's not good.
It'd be very interesting to know what other companies have been given the same level of access to air? If we're all to rock up to CASA tomorrow and say we've got this idea for a delivery drone service, can you open all the doors for us? Would it be quite interesting to see how hard they'd slam them in our face, or what access they'd let us have? A level playing field for other operators, you know, because Google, surely you can't just go in with a wad of cash and say we're going to do this.
Well, to be fair, they have submitted in excess of 200 pages of documents in relation to risk assessments and stuff. So they've done the paperwork. They've done the workshops, and they've put the time in. As to how that process would fare for if us four walked in and went, we'll do the same thing. But they have done the paperwork. They haven't just walked in, as far as I'm aware, with a stack of cash. They've done the paperwork.
Sure. Well, good. That's a good lawyerly answer. Yeah, but I mean, if we were to go with the same paperwork, I wonder if we'd be granted similar access. I do wonder if there wasn't some starstruckness and some perhaps ability for local councillors stroke ministers to stand up and say, look what's happening in our town.
You got to remember, Gary, Google pays a heap of tax in Australia. Oh, hang on, no, they don't, do they?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that was one of the gripes, wasn't it? That was revealed was that that very little money, because they said X, Y, and Z jobs were coming, and it was going to generate $9 bajillion dollars, and none of it happened. And that has been questioned, actually, that none of the part of those 200 pages of paperwork, some of it was not necessarily so. Oh, now Ian's gone. Oh, it's all going awfully well.
No, I'm still here. I'm just having a drink. I just wasn't doing sponsored by Pepsi today, that's all. So.
Oh, there we go. Another reason to demonetize it. Thank you very much. There we are. There's another one. Oh, now Bruce is going to find some other products. No, it's all a thorny subject, and we'll certainly. Oh, there we go. Oh, bloody hell!
Yeah, I'd love a new laptop, Apple. If you're going to send me one, it's never going to happen, is it?
No,
Tim Cook.
I'd like some of this. This is my last tube of it, and every single model shop in the world doesn't sell it down here now. So I've got to import this for huge money. Oohoo, poor. Lovely stuff.
Next week's live show will be sponsored by Oohoo.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Well, it's like a drinking party, but different. Right. Look, we've been going for nearly 2 hours. That's outrageous. Was there before we go? Was there anything else that caught anyone else's eye this week?
You don't forget to put Tom's contact details in the description, because we gave him a bit of a shill before. We primed him up a bit, and people are dying to get hold of him now.
We're on 30%.
Yeah. This is another sponsorship deal. Yeah, Tom.
You and you, Gary.
We details in the comments on the right hand side there, and they'll be there forever. Then.
Oh, does that go with everyone? Does it?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
The ones on the right with the social media stuff, and that'll go on to Facebook and to the Tube of the U, which will be not. YouTube.
Couple of things this week. Yeah, Skydio is shipping this week. They've put a couple of videos out. It's starting to go out the door. I don't know what the numbers are like. I don't know anyone who's had it in their hands yet. Guys have been getting their emails this week to say that they can pay for it. Some of them have. A couple of guys have had the email to pay for the accessories, but not the product, which is interesting, and I'm not sure what that's about. Also, they've opened up the ability for the third level of pre-order to also order their accessories now as well. So people are getting a little bit confused, thinking, oh, their order's coming early, but it isn't. They've got the ability to pre-order their accessories early. Now, I'm guessing they're not shipping them, but really this should be landing in people's hands in the next week or so, and that's when we'll see the real user feedback, as you do with all products at the end of the day. I'm not expecting anything to be too shabby. You've seen a lot of build videos. They've put another video out this week. I hope they're doing a lot more automation in in the build than I've seen, because they're now going to get near the numbers at that rate, because the order numbers, I'd love to know how many they've sold, but I would expect it to be substantial. And if they're doing that much hand assembly, it's going to take a while for all the pre-orders to catch up. But they're certainly getting on with it, and hopefully we'll see it this week.
Yeah, there's one on order for a friend of mine, so I'm hoping to.
Is he
to
batch
have a
one?
fly
Is he batch
I
one guy?
don't think he is. I think he might be batch 2 actually.
Yeah.
So sometime next year probably.
Yeah, hopefully this week we'll see it. There's no more news on the EU models neither at this time. Probably March or April, but they're going to have to fall under the new EU regs anyway when they do that, if it's going to be at that time, because they're going to be coming into play mid next year from June. And
that, of course, is a good example why GPS is not necessarily a good divider for model aircraft and/or other things, because I know it has got a GPS, but that's not its primary source of navigation.
And it doesn't have a compass. It doesn't have a compass at all,
No.
to give you an idea. There's no onboard mag whatsoever. So, and in theory, it's the kind of aircraft that could dump the compass as well,
It could dump the GPS. Yeah, it could.
GPS,
It could.
yeah.
Technically. And it probably will in the future. GPS being a device at the end of the day that can be very wrong. So yeah, it's it'll be hard for the regulators moving forward.
The only other thing is there was a massive update for these this week. If anyone's flying these, massive update. A lot of people happy. Not 100% there yet, but it's a big one. It's a big one.
So a little clearer, and with the OSD.
Yeah, basically it now supports Betaflight OSD integration, which allows you to use the Betaflight the OSD within Betaflight configurator, and you can have up to 24 OSD items on the FPV goggles. Pretty much everything works except GPS home point arrow, which is what everyone wants, GPS speed and altitude. They hopefully will be coming in the future. They're not in it today, but what I've heard is they're working on it, and hopefully it just needs more coding. Then they didn't want to hold things up by waiting for that. They wanted to get it out the door. They've also added analog DVR recording now, which is a big one, and it's recording properly as well. 60 frames a second, 712 by 576 in PAL, and 712 by 480 in NTSC at 60 frames a second. No line skipping like some of the DVRs in some of the Fat Shark goggles. It is absolutely a very, very good DVR, and is up there with what guys are buying separately to attach to their equipment, and some of the feedback on the DVR is looking good, real good.
Have they got 16.9 yet, or just 4.3?
No, 4.3, as I understand.
Because that 16.9 is really going to be that's what I'd like to see. 60 full field of view. That's what we want.
Hopefully it'll come. My understanding is it's not there. Hopefully it will come. There's another weird feature in it which Bruce picked me up on, and I'm still trying to get the info. I'll hopefully have it this week, which is about a new change with 1 kilometer, but I don't understand it in any shape or form either at this point in time. There's no settings for it, but hopefully we'll have more info on that this week. A lot of iNav users are kicking off going, we want this now. They want a bit of this. They've been quite quiet until now. It seems it's going to be down to both sides to move a little bit on this one, a little bit of DJI and a little bit of iNav as well. Unfortunately, iNav seem quite foot in the trench that it's not their problem, and it's all DJI. I think both sides probably need to come together to make this one happen, if there's enough.
ArduPilot?
Not at this time. I'd love Mavlink. The only problem, though, with Mavlink, and I'll put this out there now, is there is no integrated OSD within Mavlink. So you're only ever going to have the basic OSD that you had before, which doesn't contain GPS, which doesn't contain all of that stuff. So the reality is it's going to be limited. However, they did do it with the original OcuSync system, and you had the home arrow and you had those things. So there's nothing to say they can't do it. They are really pushing this with Betaflight. Betaflight seems to be where this is at. But this week's update, it's ticked probably 9 out of the 10 boxes now. There are very few reasons not to like this system today. I'll be honest, the way it seems,
Does it default to the last setting whether you choose AV or the digital system?
No, you always have to go into analog manually. Yeah, you always do. It's like a subsystem of the main one. And there are boards now. There's one on Banggood for about $15 for modules. You can buy the board now. You don't even have to mod the goggles. It's $15. Plug your Fat Shark module into it, plug it into the side, and it's ready to go. And that was a big one. It literally landed yesterday. There's been a couple of little strange issues people have had with the analog input, and it works if you change the screen settings. I'm going to actually put a video out on it tomorrow. Because some people I've only seen about 5 posts of this, but it's a weird one. Analog won't work until they reduce the screen resolution and move things around, and then suddenly it works, and it works forever. Then it's almost like a setting gets stuck in the firmware update, basically.
And your rover, when's your next rover build?
I've got to record it. I've been doing a lot of work on it. I've had a couple of days off the day job. It's actually here. I've been 3D printing bits to go around it. As those who follow me on Twitter might have seen, I managed to rip the USB off the motor controller this afternoon in an accident. I did what you shouldn't do, where they say take the props or the wheels off. Well, I didn't, and it decided to go there when the laptop was over there, and it literally ripped the USB off the board, so I had to bodge it. I don't know. Let's have a look. Can you see where I've bodged that? Let's have a look.
Yeah. I'm looking at that wiring as well.
At that bodge. Yeah, it's not finished. It's not finished. It's tested.
It's like I've done.
But again, that's being set up with HearLink. I've got a light which I mounted onto the front, but I don't like it on the front. It stops it climbing things, so I need to move it on the top. But it's coming along. Probably try and get the video out on another step on that next week. And I've got a little LiDAR on it as well, which I'm going to use for object avoidance.
Which one is that?
Where is it? It's in here. It's only in
they've put object avoidance and elastic lines or bendy ruler lines in the latest version of Ardu Rover.
They have.
So for those who don't know, that means it'll navigate. You can put your waypoints in, and if it sees something with the sensor, it'll wiggle its way around it and continue on its way. I think that's basically it, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It'll literally go and head off. Now, I haven't tried that myself in 4.0, but they've brought a load of stuff over, and it's in full release now as well. I have had a strange issue where it would decide to randomly take off on its own, and I think Tridge had a look at that one the other day and said they need to do some things on it. It's one of the little TF Mini Pluses, so it's not a full-on LiDAR. It's one of these little range-finding ones. But the TF Mini Plus, so that's going to go on the front. Actually,
that's good to know, isn't it? That the rover does the DJI drive away, just like the flyaway used to.
I've mounted it. It's going there. So, and I'm going to be using it. Yeah, again, it's like anything. At the end of the day, these things have the capability of heading off into the sunset on their own if you're not careful or get something wrong. And I was testing it on the bench, and I was actually programming the motor controller to control my LED, and I literally hit the firmware button to upload the settings, and it literally, whatever it did, it just kicked the motors in, and it just went, and the USB port was connected, and I managed to rip it off the board. It's only £120 motor controller, so it's nothing.
No, manual caliber.
I wish.
YouTube mogul.
After I stopped crying into the back of my chair, and then got the magnifying glass out and worked out I could actually get a couple of wires onto the tracks that were left onto the PCB board, and now I can still program it, and I've got a permanent USB attached to it now. So I've managed to salvage the situation. But like they always say, folks, take the props off or take the wheels off, or it could bite you. And it did me.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully next week, Ben from the Small Robot Company is going to come on and talk to us about Tom, Dick, and Harry, their 3 farming rovers. Cool. So that'll be interesting. So we're getting them lined up.
I've learned a lot over the last week. I haven't done a rover for a few years, and I've learned a lot around there's the way some of the strange things behave, you're not expecting it compared to a quad. You know, you're used to tuning PIDs and things, and you've almost got to throw all of that out the window and start again, because the PIDs do entirely different things on a rover than they do on a quad. And it's more about it trying to maintain the correct input speed that you're telling it to do, rather than it try and keep the quad behaving or how it feels. And it does affect the feel, but it's more about it how it tracks the input you're requesting from it than actually how it feels. Yeah, it's getting there. It's one of those ones. I've been 3D printing all day. I've put sides on it and stuff like that. So, and then I got a couple of builds to do with I got 2 hexes to put together. I've got one for the Cube Orange is sitting on the desk ready to program to go into one, but I'll probably start that after Christmas now. Yeah, and I've still got the RoboMaster to build after Christmas. It's still in its box.
Yeah, I forgot you got that. You get anyway. It's the children's Christmas present. I remember now. Yes. Yeah, the big child's Christmas present. Yeah, exactly.
I want to order 5, hire a room every Sunday, and charge people 20 quid an hour to fight them. I think honestly, there's a business opportunity to be made there.
I think you're right. Yeah, and then take that show on the road, take it to schools, and call it a STEM project, and you'll be A for away. And then you can charge 200 quid per unit per hour.
Yeah,
because it's teaching. Yeah, it's a funny old thing. Now, with that, on that bombshell, is there any more other news? Going once, going twice. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm sorry it's been such a muddle this week. I shall blame myself and myself only. If you're flying this weekend, enjoy it, be safe. If you're roving or floating or whatever you're doing. And if you're not safe and something does go wrong and you're in Australia, I've just put Tom's details in the chat. He's your lawyer. He's your man. I would definitely come back and talk to us again when you think about it, or when you have your crowdfunder or whatever help you need, and we'll surely help you along. And we'll look forward to seeing you all next week, dear viewers. 2100 GMT. Take care. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, gents. Cheers. Bye-bye. Now, am I going to switch this off from the mobile phone? I wonder.